Good morning, Bob. It is Friday, August 11th. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning for me here on the East Coast. You're in France. I believe it's 4 o'clock on your Friday afternoon. So happy Friday.
Thank you.
Good to see you. I want to give a little bit of an introduction. I think most of your audience knows who you are and what your background is, but we might have some new viewers. So Bob is a Vietnam veteran, flew 832 missions in Vietnam, both in the F-4 fighter and in the Cessna Bird Dog. And most of those missions were in the Cessna. And I think he actually saw more action flying the Cessna than flying the fighter. He's also the author of multiple books, two in particular that are relevant to precious metals investors: this Basic Investing in Resource Stocks, The Idiot's Guide, and then Nobody Knows Anything, Investing Basics. There are no experts, there are no gurus. And so two excellent books on investing in the resources, precious metals, and the mining stocks. But so anyway, there you go, folks. For $2, you can go read those books, and they're well worth reading. And then, of course, Bob is the founder, curator, and writer on these two websites, 321gold.com and 321energy.com. I looked this morning. It looks like you started 321 Gold in the year 2000.
Actually, 2001.
Okay, so 22 years running this website. And what's most relevant, I think, or one of the most relevant things about your background for this particular conversation, Bob, is that through this website and your association with people in the precious metals space, you have visited 400 mining projects?
Somewhere between 400 and 500. I never counted them, but I was doing 2 or 3 or 4 trips a month for really 15, 18 years.
Wow, that would be exciting. So, of course, the world of travel has changed quite a bit. And then on one of those, or it may have been more than one, you did a long road trip with Quentin Henney. And let me stop sharing my screen here. You did a long road trip with Quentin Henney, and as you've said, you ironed out or brainstormed a gold currency.
Not necessarily a gold currency. It was a monetary currency. We had both silver and gold.
Silver and gold. Okay. All right. That's interesting. And would you describe it as a precious metals backed currency or precious metals as money?
It would be both. We're of a like mind, and we were doing this back in 2008 and 2009, and we realized the debt-based system of the West is doomed, and that's obvious to everyone now. And the question has to be, if the monetary system is doomed, what do they come up with next? What I do as much as I can is use history. Now, if you go back to the French Revolution, 1789, the direct cause was the French involvement in the American Revolutionary War. And frankly, the colonists would have lost the war had it not been for the French. However, what nobody realizes is how expensive wars are, and it literally bankrupted Louis XVI. The war ended in 1783, and by 1789, the mob in Paris could no longer afford wheat, and they started a revolution, the French Revolution. All revolutions are economic in nature. And since gold and silver were hoarded because nobody wanted to use them, the revolutionary government printed notes called assignats, and they did that to an unlimited degree, just as we are today. And they were printed from 1789 until 1795, and then that financial system blew up. And then they printed something called mandats, M-A-N-D-A-T-S, and that did the same thing. And then a French colonel named Napoleon seized control, and he went back to a gold and silver standard. And interestingly enough, all of the wars that France fought until he was defeated were financed because the economy was doing so well, having real money. We are going to do the same thing. We're not going to do it because anybody wants to. We're going to do it because we have to.
Have to. Yes, I agree. Well, and so I've seen, in the excitement about, this BRICS, upcoming BRICS summit and the possibility of them announcing a gold-backed, emphasis on backed currency, I've been given a lot of thought to, would a gold-backed currency really accomplish anything? Because gold-backed is not, that doesn't mean exchangeable. I want a currency that I can take to my local bank and say, here's my paper money. I want physical silver and gold.
Well, that covers a lot of things. I'm going to send you the thing that Quentin and I came up with. I want you to be patient for just a minute. Let's see here.
Let me ask you the question while you're digging there. Do you remember during the launch, leading up to the launch of the euro, I remember that they were touting gold backed, that the euro was going to be backed by 10% gold, 15% gold, something like that. And of course, now if you go look at Wikipedia or poke around on the internet, the euro has always been a fiat currency, no mention of gold backing. Do you remember? Am I misremembering?
No, that's accurate. It was supposed to be backed to 15%.
I'm glad you're able to confirm my memory of the euro launch. That was a sales pitch.
Yeah, of course it was.
Yes, that was part of the trying to get people to accept the idea of a new currency. And that's my concern. When I see people talking about gold backed or oil backed or rare earth metals backed, I don't care what it's backed with. If I can't take it to the bank and exchange the paper currency for something physical, it's just a sales pitch.
Well, here's the key. First of all, you have to look the definition of money. Money is anything that two people agree is money. It can be shells, okay? It can be salt. It can be cows, okay? It can be pieces of paper. It can be gold. It can be silver. It can be big round rocks. As long as two people agree. Okay, and you got a lot of people now who believe the cryptocurrencies are money, and they shuffle the money back and forth. Okay, well, maybe it is, but is it going to be long term? I don't think so, because it doesn't solve any real problems. It is a solution running around looking for a problem. Gold and silver have solved financial issues for 5,000 years. Okay, that's it. Here's the key. Few people realize this, but the foreign exchange market in the world is $6.5 trillion a day. And that is a form of slippage. It costs a lot of money to convert currencies. Right now, if I want to exchange dollars for euros, it costs me 3 or 4%, and that mounts up when you're talking about $6.5 trillion a day. What Quentin and I came up with is every country would use gold and silver coins in grams. And this does not preclude you from having paper instruments that are fully backed by gold and silver. Okay. But that would be exactly what the coins would look like. And I talked to Quentin here a week ago, and I realized that under the silver coins, it should have been 2.5 grams, 5 grams, 10 grams, 20 grams. And that would be equivalent to a dime and about $0.25, $1. The strange thing is, if you could eliminate the slippage from currency exchange, you could add a couple of percent to profit on every trade. And the key is you don't need dollars, and you don't need pounds, and you don't need euros, and you don't need rubles. You go back to gold. And if you go back to the last days of the 19th century, Chile had gold, Argentina had gold, Brazil had gold, Germany had gold, Russia had gold, France had gold, the UK had gold. And the time frame between about 1825 until 1900 was the greatest growth. It's the greatest period of growth in world history. And we're going to go back to that again. But we've got a financial system that is utterly broken, and we need to fix it. Now, we should at least discuss the BRICS thing, okay? Because you and I are of the same mind. If you go back, what happened was somebody at an embassy, I think in Kenya, put out a Twitter saying they were going to come out with a gold-based currency at the BRICS summit in Johannesburg in a couple of weeks. And since then, people have made it abundantly clear that it's not on the agenda. That goes back largely to the influence of Modi in India, who is dead set against the gold-backed currency because he wants to retain the ability of government to print an unlimited amount of money. And of course, you can't do that under a gold and silver-based system. So here's my feeling. I don't think it's going to happen. Way to cure it, and the way to cure the financial system, is go back to honest money. If you got honest money, you can have an honest economy. If you don't have honest money, you can't have an honest economy.
Yeah.
So we're in a period of peak insanity. One of the things that I want to mention, because it goes back to this BRICS and gold thing, 100% of what people hear from the mainstream media today is a lie. Not 99%, not 50%, not 75%, 100% is a lie. So if you want to find out what's going on, all you have to do is listen to the media and then invert it, okay? Yeah. It's discussed. We are at peak insanity. And I think the market's going to crash soon, and we're going to have to go back to reality. And reality is, one, don't believe what the mainstream media is. And two, you've got to renew your financial system and come up with something that makes sense. Now, I do believe that BRICS is going to stumble into some kind of gold-backed system. When they do it, I can't possibly predict. But all of the people who jumped on the bandwagon, it came out authoritatively and said the BRICS was going to go to a gold standard on August 22nd. They're full of shit too.
Yes. Well, and we got that's not it. Hang on a second. We got an official statement from, this is an ambassador from South Africa, explicitly stating that there is no BRICS currency on the agenda for the August summit. So
yeah, but here's what you have to understand there. Nothing you're told is absolutely authoritative. And what you have to do is you have to look at it rationally. You have to look at the background. Now, India certainly is against a gold-backed currency, but, you know, some guy in South Africa comes out and says it's not on the agenda. You don't have to believe that either, but you have to compare one guy saying, yes, it is, and they're going to announce it, and one guy saying, well, it's not on the agenda. It is probably not on the agenda.
Well, and one of the things I've been thinking about, Bob, is that to successfully launch a gold-backed currency or any currency, cryptocurrency, whatever, there's a fair amount of infrastructure needed. You need a legal system, you need a central bank, and BRICS.
No, you don't. Why would you?
Well, if you're using,
I mean, go back to 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 years ago. Do you realize how significant the introduction of coins was?
No.
It was a giant deal, okay, because they had used gold and silver literally going back 5,000 years. However, some guy said, instead of us handing each other lumps of metal, why don't we make little tiny pieces that we can use to transact things? All people had to do is introduce coins, and it just overnight went ballistic because it was such a great change. If one country in the world went to the system that Quentin and I came up with 14 years ago, 14 years ago, they would be the richest country in the world because everybody would want to deal with them. And then everybody would turn around and say, hey, that's a fucking good idea. We need to do that.
Well, and back to the global conflict idea, one of my thoughts is that Russia and China could back their currencies with gold, not a BRICS organization, but the countries, Russia and China, they back their currencies with gold. The Western economic system basically collapses, and this global conflict is over.
It's strange enough that the Western financial system is collapsing now. Okay. Yeah. But did you happen to see what Poland has literally announced in the last day or two?
No.
They're buying gold. Okay. They're adding gold. Now, nobody goes out and buys hundreds or thousands of tons of gold and silver unless they intend to use it for something. And strange enough, I absolutely argue, and I've talked to Quentin, and we would like to see Bolivia use silver to back their currency rather than gold, because Bolivia's got a lot of silver, and the San Cristobal mine and Potosí is still producing silver. And literally all they would have to do is use the coins that we designed. And I told Quentin, I said, Quentin, that's a really good idea. And if you'll find somebody to make the coins, I'll pay for it. And all you got to do is get started, and then everybody's going to say, damn, that's a good idea.
Yes, I agree. Potosí that was the main mine for, was it the Spanish 500 years ago?
Of course.
So we've been getting getting silver from Potosi for 500 years.
Yeah, well, here's what's bizarre, and this is really important to understand. If you go to Peru, and I can't remember the name of the city, but in the south of the city, there's a convent, okay, giant convent, and they've got a lot of things going back to the 16th, 17th, 18th century, and they show China and Chinese silk, okay, and tea. And the silver was produced in Potosi. It was sent to Manila. Manila traded it to China for tea and China and silk. That was shipped to Spain and to South America. And then the British looked at it and said, damn, we'd like to have some of that stuff. So what we'll do is we'll grow opium, poppies, in Afghanistan and India. We'll ship that to China and turn them into a bunch of junkies. And that's exactly what they did. And of course, Britain was the most important military power in the world, and they defeated China every time they attacked them. China had an opium problem literally going up into the 1950s, and believe me, they were pissed. So they don't feel all that guilty now at shipping the precursors to fentanyl to the United States, because it's the United States that is addicted to drugs now, and it used to be China. So it's turnabout is fair play.
Yeah. The opium wars, I've only studied that a little bit, and it's a little bit mind-boggling that the Chinese allowed that to happen.
China didn't have the power, okay? England had the military power, and every time China tried to fight back and said, no, we're not going to let you import this thing, the England would sail a ship into Hong Kong, blow the shit out of a bunch of Chinese stuff. But the opium war was not about opium. The opium war was about silver, and all that silver came from Potosi.
Yeah. It's hard to make predictions, especially if you're talking about the future. You've said that we're headed into a collapse. The collapse is already occurring. What do you think the next couple of months are going to look like? What are we headed into this fall?
They're going to be fugly. Okay, let me give you an example. And I did an interview a week ago, and I think it was posted on Saturday. At the comment that had the most reaction from the readers was, nobody could predict the future. Yeah. And strange enough, that's not true. Okay. There are things that happen on a recurring basis, okay? And if you study history and you study sentiment, you could see things that are clearly going to happen. In 2007, I was in Singapore on a tour, and we had like 15 people, and we were touring Vietnam, gold mines in Vietnam and Indonesia and Malaysia. We were all over Southeast Asia for about 2 weeks. Somebody spent a lot of money. I mean, we had a chartered G5 or something like that. It was really cool. We were sitting in a restaurant in Singapore at the end of June of 2007. And the Bear Stearns hedge funds had just collapsed. I think there were 2 or 3 of them. And I was sitting next to a banker from Australia who was in charge of their derivatives. And obviously, when you're on a mining tour and you got a bunch of guys, liquor makes everything better. And I was about half trashed. And I turned to him, I said, look, I mean, these derivatives, you guys just make that shit up, don't you? Yep. And he kind of smiled and said, well, yeah, we do. And I said, well, take this and smoke it. this just started the great collapse, okay? And it's not going to be next week or next month, but this Bear Stearns funds going under is what's going to bring the system down. And of course, that goes into 2008. So in January of 2008, I was speaking at a gold conference in Vancouver. And I never have a prepared speech, ever. I'm incapable, I'm too old, and I'm too lazy to do that.
Yeah.
So I always speak extemporaneously. And Joe Martin said, wait, you got to have a title. I said, I don't want a title. I don't have a speech. So why would I have a title? He said, because we're going to print it in all the forms and everything. You got to have a title. I said, okay, well, call it the financial collapse of 2008. So I go to Vancouver. I'm in front of 200 or 300 or 500 people. And it's President's Day. And the market dropped like 200 points, 300 points, big drop. So I said, look, Joe Martin required that I came up with a title. And I just threw this title at him because I'm convinced it's going to happen. If you don't believe that we're going to have a financial collapse in October, go home now. Turn your fucking television on and you can watch it. Okay. And literally, I knew people who got caught short. Okay. And they were long. Okay. And they believed there was going to be a crash, and it was President's Day, and they couldn't transfer money from their bank to pay their margin. I knew guys that lost millions of dollars who were correct on the market. They just happened to be long on President's Day. But you go into October 2008, I had been predicting it for like 15 months. So I believe, and I could be wrong. Okay, there are no gurus, there are no experts. I write books, make a lot of money at 99 cents. Markets like to crash in October. We're absolutely seeing absurd sentiment in the major S&P and Dow and NASDAQ, and the time is right for a major crash.
Yes.
So we need to have another interview in November, and you say, damn, Bob, you call that absolutely correct, but that's just magic. Or you could say, you were running your mouth, you had no idea what you're talking about, you were dead wrong, and now the S&P's hitting new highs and everybody's trading cryptos and making tons of money. How does it feel to be a fool? Well, damn, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
Yeah. One of the challenges with knowing what's going on in the financial system is that so much of it is hidden. And so, for example, people don't understand that their pension funds, their retirement funds, insurance companies, on their books, they've got all kinds of garbage that Wall Street has sold to them. And for example, commercial mortgage-backed securities. And so we can look and we can see that the commercial real estate market is clearly in the process of crashing. We've got any number of examples now of buildings that have sold at 63% less than it sold the last time it flipped. And so we know that those commercial-backed securities are taking a hit, but we don't know how bad that hit is. We don't know how many derivatives have been created on top of that debt. Same story for bonds, whether you want to talk about government bonds or commercial bonds, corporate bonds, or municipal bonds for that matter. all of that kind of paper is crashing, but we don't see it. We're not seeing headlines saying, this pension fund just lost 40% of its assets. And so you tell somebody, hey, the markets are going to crash in October. And they say, well, I'm up 15% since January, and so they stay long.
Well, let me correct you on one thing, and the way I'm going to do this, use a comparison. Okay, the biggest financial gurus in the 1920s would have been Bernard Baruch and Joseph Kennedy and the people surrounding them. They knew bad things were coming, and they were prepared. And actually, you make far more money in a depression than you do in a booming economy. Okay, because nothing changes physically. The only thing that changes is who owns things. When people are prepared, it is a time of opportunity to make money like you never even dreamed of. And I'm going to throw this in. Every society has rich people, and every society has poor people. And what determines the stability of a society is the size and nature of the middle class. The United States and the EU have been destroying the middle class for years, yes, and that is exceptionally dangerous. At the same time, it gives you the opportunity to make a decision. If, as a member of the middle class, you're being destroyed, and believe me, people do realize it, you have a choice. Would you like to be among the rich, or would you like to be among the poor? And it's a decision that everybody gets to make. And that's exactly why I run my site. And that's exactly why I do interviews, because I'm trying to help people make the decision to get rich rather than to get poor. Now, let's go back to 1929 again. 1929, the average Joe had no access to information, period. The only thing he knew is what he was fed on the radio or in the newspaper. Now, if you compare that to now, there is more information available now than at any point in time in recorded history. The question is, are you going to listen to the mainstream media? Are you going to do your own independent research? And I encourage people every time I can, if there was ever a time you want to study and think and listen and learn, now would be the time.
Yeah. You just you mentioned the middle class as being the key to a strong economy. My understanding of the American economy during the 1800s, that was the first time that we really had a significant middle class in America. And it's interesting that we were on a gold standard. The middle class was able to develop, and that was the greatest period of growth in our country. And just emphasizing how important the middle class is. And as you say, Bob, right now they're being destroyed. Inflation is a destructor. A market crash will certainly be a destructor. The middle
taxes.
class.
Taxes.
Oh,
taxes.
Taxes.
Okay.
Yes.
The government is out of control. It is run by idiots who are utterly clueless. The military-industrial complex has controlled the United States literally since about 1940. Enormous fortunes are being made today. There is the greatest disparity between rich and poor than in world history.
So we talked about gold-backed currency versus gold as money, and I believe you're saying basically it's got to be gold as money, or gold and silver. We need a real currency to have an honest economy.
Exactly.
Real money, yeah. Do you think it's likely, is Russia or China likely to back their currencies with gold?
No, they bought it just because they needed to store it and gather dust. Of course, they're going to use that. Of course, Poland is buying gold. Every individual, every company, every government agency, every country needs reserves, and there are no better reserves than gold and silver. They're doing it because they can see the fatal flaws of the euro and the dollar, and that's what the BRICS is all about. And I think there have been like 37 or 70, there's a bunch of countries that have applied to join BRICS. France actually, Macron went to BRICS and said, hey, I'd like to come sit in on the meetings. And they said, take a hike.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct. But the guys that wrote The Fourth Turning, same thing. All that shit was predicted. It was predicted in 1997. And the guy who was one of the co-authors of The Fourth Turning has just come out with another book saying, okay, we're in the fourth turning, and here's what's going to happen. So these are things we have access to information now, and it is incumbent on everyone to educate themselves. There are no experts. There's no gurus. You got to learn how to think for yourself, and you have to learn how to take responsibility for yourself.
Yeah. I just started reading The End of Growth, which talks about, peak oil, demographics, getting it. I believe the book is going to get at some of the same ideas in The Fourth Turning, is that basically it's time for change. That we're at a period where radical change is going to occur, whether we like it or not.
That's a very accurate statement.
Yeah. Well, Bob, we've been going for about an hour, a little bit over an hour at this point. I really appreciate you coming on. Have you got anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
The interesting thing about The Fourth Turning is everybody who's familiar with the book is aware that it predicted a turn towards totalitarianism, but less obvious is the fact that he said it would be a regrowth of people wanting freedom. So I don't look at the chaos that we're in as necessarily a bad thing. Like a hurricane, you got to go through it, but you got to plan for what's happening on the other side. And it's incumbent on people to educate themselves and take responsibility for themselves. Because if you think those idiots in the government are going to take care of you, they ain't gonna.
Right. Well, and historically, and obviously we're both gold bugs, precious metals bugs, but historically, if you were trying to protect your wealth, you got out of paper assets and you put it into physical gold and silver. And so that's my advice for anybody that's willing to listen, is that, get out of the banking system, get out of your paper investments, get into physical precious metals. Do you?
I wouldn't go that far because it's too restrictive. Paper assets are about to assume their real value, which is zero, and real assets are about to assume their real value, which is substantial. So it's not just gold and silver, it's land, it's it's productive companies. I would buy a tanker of oil if I had a place to store it, okay? But it's a time to be in things that are real rather than things that are imaginary. And strange enough, we are starting to see leadership from other areas in the world. And that's what the whole BRICS thing is about. And they're saying, hey, wait a minute, the Western-based financial system has been screwing us for 500 years, and we're tired of it. And frankly, I fully support that.
Yeah. it's refreshing to me to see the events in Africa right now, that the African people are standing up and saying, look, no more. We're not playing your colonial games anymore. And it's going to be messy, but it's refreshing. That I think, and I see that as part of what you were saying about the fourth turning. We have a choice. We don't have to go down the totalitarian road. We can go down the freedom road.
Everybody has a choice, and that's a good thing because they didn't have a choice.
So you posted an interview on your site this morning. I was able to watch it. You talked about your wine production this year not coming in well, and you referred to it as Chateau Facts. Is that this year? Oh, Chateau Facts. I love it. Chateau Facts.
I'll give a short synopsis. All of the weird weather of the last 2 years has been due to that giant volcano, the underwater volcano that erupted in January 2022, that threw billions of tons of water into the atmosphere. The wine crop in the south of France has been destroyed. There have been hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of damage, but the record rains in China, the turnaround on the West Coast where they had record rains out there, the thing in Maui, okay, that's going on right now. There's a lot of tragedies. 100% of it was because of the volcano and the water thrown into the atmosphere. And it's going to continue. There's going to be an impact for another 2 or 3 years.
Yes, yes. And I find it interesting that you see headlines about record heat, hottest year ever, and absolutely no mention of the volcano.
Well, strange enough, the record heat also, the world's magnetic pole is about to shift, and the Van Allen belt, okay, that protects the Earth from radiation from the sun has decreased significantly. So it's a combination of the magnetic forces decreasing and the volcano at the same time. For all I know, the volcano may have been triggered by the magnetic forces decreasing. The Earth has gone through climate change for 4.5 billion years. Okay.
Yeah, there's some the planetary alignments going into 2024 or 2025 could have some serious impact on us living here on planet Earth, but we don't want to get into that. So,
you want to know the good news?
Huh?
Everybody's got to die of something. It's like a rule.
Yes, nobody gets out alive. That's the way I say it. Nobody gets out alive. So this year's wine is Chateau Facts. Last
year's wine.
Oh, that was last, but you didn't have Facts last year.
Well, so.
Oh, okay. Okay. Is there any wine for this year?
Yeah, last year's.
Last year's. So
it's so bad. Now, I deliberately planted grapes that I wanted. Okay, they're Pinot grapes because I like Pinot. And everybody said it's the wrong grape for this area, but last year's wine was really excellent. I mean, it was good wine. The correct grape for this area is not as sensitive to mildew and fungus as the Pinot grapes. But the guy who made the wine for me, he's lost 50% of his crops. It's been catastrophic. And I'm going to tell you, you can go all over the world, and agriculture has been hurt significantly And in India, they just announced they're not going to export rice. India produced 40% of the rice in the world. And they're saying, nonsense, we need it here. So there's going to be food issues, but it's not climate change that caused it. It's economic stupidity and changes in magnetism and the volcano.
Yeah. I understand that the volcano, it was not just water vapor, but ash as well, that will particularly affect the growing of crops in the southern hemisphere. And so they're particularly, they could be even more affected by the volcano in the southern hemisphere than we are here in the northern hemisphere. So interesting times. That may you live in interesting times. Isn't that what the Chinese?
That's an ancient Chinese curse.
Exactly. Yes. And I'm not cursing you, Bob. I really appreciate you coming on. Always a pleasure to speak with you. Where can people find your work?
321gold.com, 321energy.com, and amazon.com.
Let's go ahead and wrap it up, Bob.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good talking to you, Bob.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Bye-bye. So we just spent an hour with Bob, and I always enjoy talking with Bob. He's a very intelligent individual. He's a student of history, extensive experience in the precious metals space, financial markets, just a great resource for me. I really enjoy talking with him. And so I found myself thinking about the interview, as I'm getting ready to publish. And one of the things Bob had said is that markets crash in October. And so I wanted to review, it's like, okay, let me go back and look at the stock markets and do they really crash in October? And so we're going to look at some charts here real quick. And then this is another thing that Bob said just to keep in mind, paper assets are about to assume their real value, which is zero. Well, stocks are paper. So yes, they're shares in corporations, but at the end of the day, stocks are paper. And so just keep that in mind. So this is October of 1987, 36% drop from the high to the low. So that would be a confirming data point. There's an October crash. Here's October of 2000. That's when the dot-com bubble popped. So there's data point number 2. And notice that this was a multi-year decline all the way into 2003. And then one of the ways that we got out of this market crash was the Fed blew another bubble. This is when they started blowing the housing bubble. And so we went from one bubble into the next bubble. Basically, we've been in a series of bubbles, financial bubbles, ever since the dot-com crash. So here's another October crash, 2007. That's when the great financial crisis started. Markets declined for about 18 months before they found a bottom, headed back up. Here's another October crash. This is 2018. Only a 20% decline. And, so maybe we don't want to call that a crash. If you're comfortable sitting through a 20% decline, okay, good for you. It doesn't feel good while that's happening. Even if it bottoms at 20% and heads back up and even heads up to new highs, it still doesn't feel good while it's happening. So now I can't give financial advice. I'm no longer an investment advisor. I don't have that registration anymore, and you aren't my client. And so I cannot give you financial advice. I can throw suggestions out there for you to consider. So one of the ways we can protect ourselves in the financial markets, the stock markets in particular, is to employ trailing stops on our positions. And so you could have a trailing stop at 15% or 10% or 20%, wherever you're comfortable, as we head into October, just in case the markets do crash. You could have trailing stops in place on your positions. And so You lose some, but you don't lose a bunch. Lose whatever you're comfortable with. And continuing with the idea that, okay, maybe markets crash in October, are there any recent events that would contribute to markets crashing this October, 2 months from now, basically? And sure enough, well, we've got the Fitch ratings on August 1st. They downgraded the credit rating of the United States from AAA to AA+. And these are some of the quotes from their report. So they're expecting a recession in fourth quarter of 23 and first quarter of 24. Well, U.S. economy being in recession in the fourth quarter, well, that's October. So there's another data point that would support an October crash, decline, however you want to look at it. And then this is another thing from Fitch. They're expecting one more rate hike by September. Well, that's the next FOMC meeting is in September. So, another quarter point hike in September would certainly be a contributing factor to a market decline, a significant market decline in October. So, there's another data point. And then this is, again, Fitch is not expecting any cuts in interest rates until March of 2024. And so these two data points together, if part of your strategy in the stock market is expecting a Fed pivot, a pause, anything about lower interest rates, well, my bias, personally, I don't think that's going to happen. And here's Fitch ratings. Don't take it from Brian, take it from Fitch ratings. Another rate hike and no decrease in rates before March of 2024. This is the Congressional Budget Committee. And again, we're looking at factors that could contribute or support a market crash in October. On August 2nd, this is a working paper that they published. Spending and debt is unsustainable. Interest costs are out of control. Inflation and interest rate hikes have weakened our economy. We will be in recession by the end of the year. And so again, this is a Congressional Budget Committee saying we're going to be in recession by the end of the year, which certainly supportive of a decline in the stock markets. And then this, over the next 3 years. So this budget committee is expecting fiscal deterioration over the next 3 years. And basically that's a ridiculous amount of spending by the Congress critters, increasing interest rates, increasing costs to support the federal debt, etc. So anyway, they're expecting increasingly worse financial picture over the next 3 years, which could support not only a decline in October, but a 18-month decline or a multi-year decline, like we saw in these charts. Here's continuing the Congressional Budget Committee. Annual deficits projected to double. So this is basically a doubling of deficit spending. Well, we're currently at about $1.4 trillion. So he's saying 2.8. So $2.8 trillion in deficit spending every year. Interest costs expected to triple in just 10 years. And so that's, what's that, 2033? Well, currently interest costs are at almost 1 trillion. It's 900 billion at this point. A tripling would be 3 trillion. So $3 trillion just to pay the interest on the federal debt by 2033. And so again, financial health rapidly deteriorating, debt trajectory completely unsustainable. Wake up call. Wake up call. And so that's that's the point of what I'm sharing with you right now. This is my wake-up call for you, call to action, if you will. And here's another quote from Bob. I knew guys that lost millions of dollars who were correct on the market. And what Bob, this is from the interview, what Bob was saying is that these people knew that the market was going to decline, but they were still long. They were long in the stock market, they were long in their investments, and then when the market did crash, they lost millions of dollars. And so anyway, again, call to action. Put trailing stops into your stock positions if that makes sense for you. Just an idea to consider. My bias is to precious metals. As you heard in the interview, I recommend physical precious metals in your personal possession. Now, if you have tax-advantaged investments, the IRS doesn't allow you to take that money and do anything with it without some significant costs. Basically, you're going to pay a 10% early withdrawal penalty, and then you're going to pay income taxes on the money to boot. So it's very expensive to access your tax-advantaged investments, retirement savings. But what you can do with that money is move some of it into a precious metals IRA. You can protect your tax-advantaged retirement savings with precious metals using a Gold IRA. In the description below this video, you'll find a link to Augusta Precious Metals. And of the Gold IRA companies that I've investigated, I like Augusta best. They take care of their customers. They're serious about educating their customers. And so anyway, if you're interested in investigating a Gold IRA for yourself, get in touch with Augusta. They'll set you up with an investor kit. They'll spend time with you on the phone. You can get a one-on-one teleconference with their financial advisor. Anyway, if you're interested in Gold IRA, I suggest you check out Augusta. I'm going to shut it off here. We've spent plenty of time together, and I look forward to spending time with you again.